I was never much into dating apps, but after months of my friend Lauren insisting, I finally gave in and created a profile on Tinder. That's how I met Ethan. He was charming in our messages, always knowing just what to say to make me laugh. After a few conversations, we met up at a busy coffee shop, and he was even more captivating in person. He had this confident energy that wasn't overbearing, and those striking blue eyes that seemed to look right through you. We went on a few more dates, always in public places, and he was a perfect gentleman. When he invited me to his house for dinner, I hesitated but eventually said yes. After all, he seemed trustworthy, and I felt comfortable around him. His house was on a quiet street, surrounded by tall trees that swayed gently in the wind. When I parked, I noticed all the windows were shut tight, even on that warm night. I sat in my car for a few seconds before knocking on the door, and Ethan opened it with a wide smile. But there was something off in the air. Maybe it was the smell, a mix of mildew and something sour that I couldn't quite place. He was impeccably dressed, like he was going to a fancy restaurant, which made me feel a bit underdressed in my casual outfit. "Welcome to my humble abode," he said with an exaggerated gesture, which got a nervous laugh out of me. As soon as I stepped inside, I noticed the house was peculiar. The furniture was old and mismatched, and the walls were covered with strange artwork, giant staring eyes, distorted human figures, and things that looked like they came straight out of a nightmare. "You have a unique taste in art," I commented, trying to sound casual. He chuckled and replied, "Oh, I like things that tell a story." But what really unnerved me was the feeling that the paintings were watching me. In one corner there was a pile of crumpled papers, like he had been trying to write something and given up multiple times. He noticed my gaze and quickly changed the subject, saying dinner was almost ready. While he was in the kitchen, stirring pots, I sat on the living room couch and texted Lauren. "I'm at Ethan's house. Seems nice, but a bit weird. I'll let you know when I leave." That's when I heard a noise from upstairs, heavy footsteps moving across the floor. I looked toward the staircase, but it was too dark to see anything. "Do you have company?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Ethan appeared in the doorway with a confused look. "Company? No, it's just us." He laughed and went back to the kitchen, but there was something forced about his tone. I sat there for a few more minutes, trying to convince myself I was just imagining things. Maybe the noise came from an old pipe or a neighbor's house, but the uneasy feeling in my chest only grew stronger. To distract myself, I started looking around. There was a bookshelf full of books, but many of them had no titles on their spines, just plain, worn black covers. I pulled one out, curious about how different it looked, and found its pages filled with scribbles. They were words and symbols that didn't make any sense, like someone had drawn them in a frenzy. Before I could look closer, Ethan appeared in the doorway with 2 plates in his hands. "Hope you like chicken with mustard sauce," he said, still smiling, but he looked a little tense now. We sat down at the dining table and he started talking about his job, something related to graphic design. It was light conversation, but my mind was still stuck on that strange sound from earlier. As he talked, I noticed he avoided direct eye contact for more than a few seconds at a time. I also picked up on how he kept fidgeting with his fingers, like he was nervous. Suddenly his phone, which was sitting on the table, buzzed. The screen lit up for just a moment, but long enough for me to read the message. "She's there. What are you going to do now?" My heart raced, but I pretended not to have seen it. He quickly grabbed his phone and slipped it into his pocket, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I tried to keep the conversation normal, but my thoughts were running wild. Who had sent that message? And what did "what are you going to do now" mean? I decided it was time to leave. "Ethan, dinner was great, but I think I need to get going. I have an early morning tomorrow," I lied, standing up from the chair. His smile faltered for a moment, but then it returned, though it looked strained this time. Of course. Let me grab your things." He turned and started walking toward the living room, and at that moment I heard the noise again. Footsteps. This time, louder and faster, like someone was running upstairs. My body froze. "Ethan, are you sure we're alone?" He stopped in the middle of the living room and slowly turned back to me with an expression I couldn't read. "I told you, we're alone. You must be imagining things. This house makes weird noises sometimes." But I knew I wasn't imagining it. Those footsteps were real, and now they sounded like they were coming down the stairs. Without thinking, I grabbed my purse from the couch and started walking toward the door. "Wait!" Ethan shouted. But before he could say anything else, there was a loud thud behind me, like something heavy had fallen to the floor. Frozen at the door, my mind was racing. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but a morbid curiosity held me there for just a moment longer. "What was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but it came out shaky. Ethan took a step forward, extending his hand as if to calm me down. "Nothing, probably just one of the shelves. The weight of the books, you know?" He smiled, but he looked more nervous than before. Then it happened again. Another loud thud, even heavier, followed by what sounded like scratching, like nails dragging across wood. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I opened the door and bolted to my car. As I ran, I could hear Ethan shouting, "Wait, you can't leave like this!" His tone was desperate, which only made me run faster. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so much that it took me a few tries to get the key in the ignition. The second the engine started, I reversed out of the driveway so fast I nearly hit the gate. As I sped down the street, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Ethan was standing at the doorway, completely still, just watching me. But what really sent chills down my spine was that, for a split second, I thought I saw another figure behind him, half hidden in the darkness of the hallway. I blinked, and it was gone. I drove to a gas station and parked under one of the bright lights, trying to catch my breath. My heart was pounding, and my mind was spinning with questions. Who had sent that text? Who or what was upstairs? I couldn't hold it in any longer and called the police. I explained everything, from the strange noises to the suspicious text on his phone. They sounded skeptical at first, but said they'd check it out. I waited at the gas station, sipping water and trying to calm myself down. After about an hour, I got a call back. It was the police. They said they'd gone to Ethan's house but found nothing unusual. Their explanation didn't make sense. How could they have found nothing? I asked about the noises and the text on his phone, but they said Ethan claimed I'd overreacted and that the noise was just the old house settling. Something in the officer's voice told me he didn't believe my story. Frustrated and still scared, I decided to look into Ethan myself. I found his Tinder profile, and to my surprise, he had already deleted it. I searched for his address online, but nothing unusual came up. However, on a local forum, I found an old post mentioning a house on that same street where strange, unexplained events had happened years ago. The forum post was short but disturbing. A local resident mentioned that the house where Ethan lived had been vacant for years after a woman mysteriously disappeared. No one knew what had happened to her, but the last time she was seen, she had entered that very house. The post was vague but mentioned strange noises and unexplainable movements coming from the upper floor, which sent chills down my spine. My heart raced as I read it. Why would Ethan be living in a house with such a dark history? And more importantly, what was he hiding that night? I decided I had to tell Lauren. She always had good advice, and honestly, I needed to talk to someone to make sense of everything. When I got to Lauren's place, she was incredulous. "You went to some guy's house alone after meeting him on Tinder? Are you crazy?" I couldn't blame her. I already felt stupid enough. But when I told her the details, including the noises, the paintings, and the text on his phone, her expression shifted to genuine concern. "That's not normal, not at all. You need to forget about this guy and never go back there." I agreed, but deep down I couldn't shake the feeling that there were too many unanswered questions. And that silhouette I thought I saw, was it just my imagination? Over the next few days I tried to move on with my life, but something kept gnawing at me. I started having recurring nightmares about the house, always waking up just as something was about to emerge from upstairs. Worse, I began receiving texts from unknown numbers. They were short, but chilling, like, "You should have stayed. He's not who you think he is." And the most terrifying one, "We're still here." I showed the messages to Lauren, who insisted I change my number immediately. I did, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. Then, weeks later, I got an unexpected call. It was a number from the police department. One of the officers who responded to my report that night reached out. He apologized for their initial skepticism and said that after my call, other reports about the house had surfaced. Neighbors had reported hearing screams coming from the house in the middle of the night, and more recently, a mail carrier had gone missing after delivering something there. He suggested I come down to the station to provide more details about my experience. I knew this might be my last chance to close this chapter, but just the thought of reliving that night made my skin crawl. I always thought I had a good sense of security. Lock the door when leaving, check the windows, even use a bike lock at the park. But somehow, I never imagined something like this could happen to me. It all started in the most ordinary way. I'd been chatting with a woman named Rachel on a dating app for weeks. She seemed fun, smart, and above all, normal. The night we planned to meet, I was actually excited. After a long day at work, a date sounded like a nice change of pace. But 30 minutes before we were supposed to meet, she sent me a message canceling. A generic excuse. Something came up at work. I was disappointed, but stuff like this happens. I went home early that night. My apartment was as it always was, a modest place with simple furniture and controlled clutter. I tossed my bag on the couch and headed straight for the shower. It was only afterward, as I walked through the living room with a towel slung over my shoulder, that I noticed something odd. My couch was slightly out of place, almost imperceptibly, as if it had been nudged forward, and there was a glass of water sitting on the coffee table. A glass I definitely didn't leave there. My first reaction was to laugh nervously. I must have been too tired, right? Maybe I forgot to put it away in the morning. In the following days, small things continued to bother me. My keyring felt out of order when I grabbed it in the morning. The kitchen light, which I always turned off before leaving, was on when I got home. None of it was serious enough for me to worry, so I kept brushing it off. Everyone has moments of distraction, don't they? It wasn't until I saw her at the coffee shop that my perspective began to shift. There she was, Rachel, the woman from the dating app who never showed up for our dinner. She was sitting at a corner table, casually scrolling through her phone. When she saw me, she smiled like we were old friends. I hesitated but walked over to her. Before I could say anything, she said my name, like she'd known me for years. "What a coincidence to see you here." Her tone was casual, but something about the way she looked at me sent a chill down my spine. It was like she already knew I'd be there. We chatted for a few minutes, and as she talked about coffee, books, and other trivial things, I realized she mentioned oddly specific details about me. Things I had never told her on the app. My neighborhood, the coffee shop I frequented, even my Wednesday running routine. My muscles tensed. How did she know all that? I left that coffee shop with my stomach in knots. I tried convincing myself it was just a coincidence, that maybe I'd mentioned something without realizing it during our chats on the app. But I couldn't shake the way she looked at me, with that smile that seemed to know more than it should. That night, I tried to follow my normal routine. I made dinner, watched an episode of some random show, and went to bed early. But sleep wouldn't come. I kept tossing and turning, replaying every detail of our conversation. Something didn't add up. The next morning I decided to do a deep clean of my apartment, more to distract myself than anything else. As I was organizing the books on my shelf, something caught my eye. One of the books was upside down, its cover facing the back. It was strange because I'm meticulous about how I organize my books. I even have a system. Fiction always goes on the top shelf, arranged by author. I picked up the book and flipped through it, but there was nothing unusual. Still, the uneasiness grew. It felt like small traces of someone else's presence were in my space. Someone who shouldn't have been there. That's when I decided to check the app again. Maybe there was something in her profile I hadn't noticed before. When I logged in, I saw that Rachel had deleted her account. No photos, no messages, nothing. It was as if she had never existed. My heart started pounding. I opened my phone gallery to see if I still had the screenshots I'd taken of her profile. A silly habit I'd picked up to remember details before dates. They were there, but looking closer I noticed something I hadn't before. In the background of one of the photos, there was a reflection in a window. It looked like a room. That resembled mine. My mind started racing. That explained the couch out of place, the glass of water, the lights I was sure I'd turned off. But how? How had someone gotten into my apartment? I started mentally retracing my steps over the past few days. Had I forgotten to lock the door at some point? Could someone have tampered with the lock? I decided to check around the building for any signs of a break-in, but everything seemed normal. Still, that nagging feeling of being watched started to settle deep inside me. That night, I double-locked every door and window in the apartment. I even dragged a chair to block the front door, something I had never done before. Still, sleep was nearly impossible. I had this constant feeling that I wasn't alone. The dead silence of the night seemed to amplify every tiny sound. The creak of the wood, the hum of the fridge, even the sound of my own breathing. Deep down, I knew it wasn't just the noises of the apartment. Something was wrong. The next morning, I decided I needed answers. I called the building manager, a man named Frank, who was always friendly. I asked if anyone unusual had been seen entering the building over the past few days. He said no. He told me the security cameras were working fine, but that he hadn't noticed anything suspicious. That only made my anxiety worse. Before hanging up, I asked if anyone else had a copy of my apartment key. He hesitated. "Just you and the previous tenant, but he returned his set when he moved out," he said, sounding confident. But I wasn't convinced. I decided to review the security footage myself. After a bit of persistence, Frank let me look at the recordings from the past week. For hours I fast-forwarded through people coming and going. Nothing seemed unusual until I noticed something at the time I usually left for work. A woman with medium-length dark hair walked through the main door, holding her phone and walking briskly. Visitors weren't uncommon, but there was something about the way she avoided looking directly at the cameras that stood out. The worst part came minutes later. Another camera, located in the hallway on my floor, clearly showed this same woman entering my apartment with a key. My mind was spinning in 1,000 directions. It was her, Rachel. There was no doubt about it. I felt a mix of anger and fear as I realized just how close she had gotten without me noticing. I kept trying to figure out how she could have gotten a copy of my key. As the thoughts piled up, one unsettling truth began to emerge. She already knew a lot about me before we'd even arranged the date. This felt too carefully planned. But why? That night, I was determined to find concrete proof that Rachel had broken into my apartment. I spent hours turning the place upside down. I looked under the couch, inside the cabinets, even in places I rarely checked, like the toolbox on top of my wardrobe. That's when I found something that froze me in my tracks. It was a photo of me. Not just any photo, one I had no idea how she could have gotten. I was sitting on my couch with my laptop on my lap. The photo looked recent. My heart raced. This meant she had been in my apartment while I was there. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? That a woman I met on a dating app was stalking me and had broken into my apartment? It all sounded so unreal that I doubted they'd take me seriously. Still, I couldn't ignore it any longer. I decided to install cameras around the apartment. That same night, I went to a 24-hour store and bought a few basic but functional ones. I set one up in the living room, one in the hallway, and another in my bedroom, all hidden. If she came back, I'd have evidence. The days passed, and everything went eerily quiet. I waited for some sign that Rachel was still around, but nothing happened. The lights stayed off, the furniture remained in place, and no mysterious glasses of water appeared on my table. I began to think maybe she had given up, or that the sight of the cameras, if she had noticed them, scared her off. But then, one night, my phone buzzed with a notification from the camera app. Motion detected. Living room. My heart nearly stopped. With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone and opened the app. The image was grainy but clear enough to see what was happening. A female figure stood in the middle of the living room, completely still, as if waiting for something. It was Rachel. She was staring directly at the camera, like she knew exactly where it was hidden. Slowly, she raised her hand and waved. It was a short wave, but enough to send chills down my spine. Without thinking, I closed the app and called the police. The minutes until the police arrived were the longest of my life. I locked myself in my bedroom, propping a chair against the door, and stayed completely silent, straining to hear any noise in the apartment. My heart was pounding so loudly it felt like it echoed in my ears. I couldn't bring myself to look at the camera app again. Just the thought of her walking around my apartment, mere feet away from me, made my whole body freeze. Finally, the sound of sirens broke the silence. I jumped up, rushed to the door, and let the officers in. They searched every corner of the apartment, but Rachel was gone. I explained everything that had happened, from the furniture being out of place to the video footage. I showed them the recording from the camera, and as they watched, I could see the disbelief on the officer's face. "Do you have any idea how she got in?" one of them asked. That's when I remembered the previous tenant's keys. Maybe she'd somehow gotten a copy, but it still didn't explain the most unsettling part, how she had known so much about me from the start. They promised to investigate, but as I suspected, they didn't seem very optimistic. That night, I didn't go back to the apartment. I checked into a hotel instead. The thought of staying there, even with the police involved, was unbearable. In the middle of the night, I received a message from an unknown number. It said simply, "You didn't have to call the police. It's over now." There was no signature, but I knew it was her. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, staring at my phone, waiting for another message that never came. After that, I never saw or heard from Rachel again. The investigation went nowhere, and the camera footage was filed away with no real answers. I changed the locks, sold the apartment, and moved to a new city. But even now, whenever I'm home alone, I feel the need to check every room before going to bed. I don't know if it's truly over, or if she's still out there, watching from a distance. The scariest thought of all is the one that haunts me to this day. How many times had she been in my apartment without me knowing? Back then, I was in my second year of college, trying to juggle tough classes, a barely paid internship, and the social life I insisted on keeping. It was a Friday night, and I was exhausted. All I wanted was to step out of my routine for a few hours. That's how I ended up agreeing to a Tinder date with a guy named Eric. He seemed harmless, even charming, in his pictures. An easy smile, slightly messy hair, and that casual pose in front of a lake. He said he was local, knew the area well, and even suggested a cozy coffee shop near my campus. It felt like a safe enough plan, considering I usually avoided meeting people so soon after matching. But that night, my gut instinct was strangely silent. I arrived at the cafe first, a small cozy spot with old picture frames lining the walls and the comforting smell of freshly ground coffee in the air. He arrived shortly after, wearing a worn leather jacket and dark jeans. Eric was just as pleasant as he'd seemed over chat, though something about the way he scanned the room like he was checking for something, or someone, made me slightly uneasy. I brushed it off, thinking I was being overly cautious. We talked about classes, hobbies, and movies. He was articulate and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, though his smile never quite reached his eyes. When I finished my cappuccino, he offered to drive me back to campus. My usual ride had canceled, and the night bus was notoriously slow. Despite a small twinge of doubt, I agreed. We got into his car, an older gray sedan that smelled faintly of cigarettes mixed with fabric softener. At first, the conversation flowed naturally, though I noticed he drove a bit absent-mindedly, like his thoughts were elsewhere. Instead of taking the direct route to campus, he turned left when he should have gone straight. When I asked about it, he casually said he was avoiding traffic. But there wasn't any traffic at that time, and his excuse felt forced. That's when the unease started to settle deep in my chest. Eric kept driving through dark, deserted streets, taking us further and further from the route I knew. My heart began to race, but I tried to stay calm. I asked again if he was sure about where we were going, and he let out a short laugh, something more mocking than reassuring. My instincts were screaming at me to get out of the car, but we were on a desolate road surrounded by trees with no sign of life nearby. My hand trembled as I discreetly pulled my phone out of my pocket and typed 911 without dialing yet. When I glanced at him, I saw that he had noticed. The atmosphere in the car turned as tense as a wire about to snap. I tried to act normal, but my mind was racing. "Where exactly are we going?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound casual. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning white. "Relax," he said, his tone anything but relaxing. The friendly smile from the cafe was gone, replaced by something cold, almost calculating. My mouth went dry and my heart felt like it was pounding out of my chest. It was clear something was very wrong. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I hit the call button, and as the ringing started, pretended to be responding to a text. When the dispatcher picked up, I spoke without looking at my phone, trying to keep it discreet. "Hey, Mom, I'm on my way back to campus. Everything's fine." I hoped the person on the other end would pick up on the subtle message. The dispatcher replied calmly, asking if I needed help. I paused, as if listening to my mom, and said, "Yeah, I should be there in about 15 minutes. It was a makeshift code to give them a rough idea of my location and how much time I thought I had. That was enough for Eric to notice something was off. He glanced at me, his eyes narrowing. "Are you calling someone?" he asked. My throat tightened, but I forced a smile. "No, just texting my mom. She always worries." He looked suspicious but didn't say anything more. Meanwhile, the dispatcher on the line was quietly asking me to describe my situation. "Yeah, Mom, it's really isolated here. Lots of trees around. It's dark, but I think I'll get there soon." I hoped they understood we were on a deserted road. Sweat was running down my back as I heard the faint clicking of a keyboard on their end. It felt like time was slipping away, and every second in that car felt suffocating. Suddenly, Eric made a sharp turn off the main road onto a narrow dirt path. The jolt threw me against the door, and my phone nearly slipped out of my hand. My panic was now impossible to hide. "Eric, what are you doing?" I shouted, unable to keep my composure. He didn't answer, just sped up, the headlights illuminating a rough trail surrounded by towering trees and distorted shadows. I knew I had to act fast. With a trembling but firm voice, I told the dispatcher, "Mom, the signal's bad here, but I'll try to keep the phone on speaker, okay?" It was my way of saying I couldn't talk anymore but needed them to hear everything. The tension in the car was almost unbearable. I knew he had realized something was wrong, but he seemed torn between confronting me outright or continuing to pretend he was in control. As he drove, I stayed silent, my eyes desperately scanning for any sign of a house, a light, or another car. Anything, really, that could help me. There was nothing but the rough dirt road, dark trees, and the deafening sound of the engine revving. My hand was sweaty as I clutched my phone, trying not to make any sudden moves that might alarm him further. The 911 dispatcher stayed silent on the line, but I knew they were listening. Finally, Eric spoke, but his tone had completely changed. "Why are you so nervous?" he asked, his voice low and threatening. "I just wanted to show you a shortcut. You're overreacting." I forced a nervous laugh, trying to buy some time. "Oh yeah? I guess I've just never been this way before, that's all. You're probably right, I'm being paranoid." He let out a short laugh, but it didn't feel genuine. Suddenly he reached out and tried to grab my phone. Instinctively I pulled it close to me and shouted, "Don't touch me!" The car swerved as he lost control of the wheel for a moment. This was my chance. Without thinking, I opened the car door. The cold night air rushed inside, and for a moment Eric hesitated, maybe trying to decide whether to stop or keep going. I took advantage of that second to scream as loud as I could, "Help! Help me, please!" Even though there was no one around to hear, I hoped it might scare him, or at least attract attention if we were closer to any houses. He cursed loudly, grabbed my arm with a painful grip, and tried to pull me back inside. That's when the car started to lose stability on the dirt road. In what felt like an eternity compressed into a single second, the car slid and skidded, crashing into something, maybe a tree. The impact threw me forward, and the door I'd opened swung wide. I managed to break free of his grip and threw myself out, landing hard on the cold, rough ground. I felt the sting of my knee scraping against the gravel, but I didn't stop to check. I got up as quickly as I could and ran, my legs shaking, my breath ragged and uneven. The engine's roar stopped, and the eerie silence of the night was broken only by the sound of leaves rustling around me. Running down the dirt path, I felt the cold air burning my lungs and low branches scratching my arms. My only goal was to put as much distance as possible between me and Eric. Despite the unnerving silence behind me, I didn't dare look back. My heart was pounding so loudly that I could barely hear my own footsteps. My phone was still in my hand, but the screen was now dark, and I wasn't sure if the 911 call was still connected. I held onto it tightly like it was my only link to the world outside this nightmare. After what felt like an eternity of running, I finally saw a faint light in the distance. It was a small house with a porch lit by a dim, makeshift lamp. I sprinted toward it, nearly tripping on the porch steps. I pounded on the door with every ounce of strength I had left, shouting for help. "Please, someone help me! He's coming after me!" My body was trembling uncontrollably and my legs almost gave out beneath me. An elderly woman opened the door, her face a mix of confusion and fear. "What's going on?" she asked, holding a flashlight and glancing nervously at the dark road behind me. Before I could explain, the sound of a siren echoed in the distance. Minutes later, 2 police officers arrived, their flashing lights cutting through the darkness and illuminating the trees around us. They helped me into their car as I tearfully explained what had happened. They immediately began searching for Eric in the car, but when they returned later, they said they hadn't found anything. It was as if he had vanished. They followed the trail to where the car should have crashed, but there was no sign of the vehicle or him. My fear deepened. How could he have disappeared so quickly, especially with the car in that condition? After that night, my life was never the same. I went to the police station to give a full statement, but the investigation led nowhere. The name Eric was fake, and so was the picture on his Tinder profile. The only lead they had was my 911 call, but even that wasn't enough. I spent weeks wondering what could have happened to me if I hadn't gotten out of that car in time. To this day, I still wonder who he really was, and what he had planned for me. What chills me the most is knowing he could still be out there, looking for his next victim. I think everyone's been there. You download a dating app, start chatting with someone interesting, and the conversation flows so naturally it feels like pure luck. That's how it started for me. Her name was Emily, or at least, that's what it said on her profile. She had a shy smile, bright eyes, and a picture in a red dress that looked like it was taken on an ordinary day. Nothing fancy, you know. It was the kind of photo that made her seem real, genuine. After a few chats, we decided to meet at a coffee shop near my place, something casual. But that day, she just didn't show up. I waited for almost an hour, feeling more foolish with every passing minute. I messaged her on the app, but there was no reply. Then when I checked her profile, it was gone. Completely deleted. I thought, okay, maybe she got cold feet, or was just messing around. It wouldn't be the first time, right? I went back home frustrated but decided to let it go. It wasn't worth obsessing over. But that same night my dog Jack started barking like crazy. He's a German Shepherd and usually calm, so it was strange seeing him so worked up. When I went to check, I saw the backyard gate was wide open. That alone was enough to put me on edge. I was 100% sure I had locked the gate. I live in a house with a big backyard and always make sure it's secure because Jack loves to roam if given the chance. I closed the gate and checked the rest of the house. Everything seemed fine, so I convinced myself I must have forgotten to lock it. Still, just to be safe, I installed extra locks the next day. But after that, little things started happening. First, it was a glass out of place in the kitchen. Then, my laptop was turned on, even though I knew I'd powered it down before leaving the house. I started getting paranoid. Every time I came home, I would go through the house, checking doors, windows, locks, everything. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more things seemed off. One day I found a throw pillow from the couch on the floor, smeared with what looked like mud. And listen, I'm not the type to leave my house messy. I keep things pretty organized. This wasn't something I'd do and forget about. I told my brother, but he just laughed and said I was overthinking. Maybe I was. But then, things took a darker turn. That night, everything seemed normal. I decided to push the paranoia aside and move on. I watched a movie and went to bed early, but Jack started barking again around 2 in the morning. This time, the barking wasn't coming from the backyard. It was at the back door. I grabbed a flashlight and went downstairs, my heart pounding. When I turned on the kitchen light, I saw the door was slightly ajar. I was absolutely certain I had locked it. It felt like a punch in the gut. I approached slowly, trying to think rationally. Maybe it was just the wind or something, but Jack was standing there tense, growling in a way I'd never heard before. When I opened the door completely, I felt the cold night air hit my face. I looked around, and nothing seemed out of place. I locked the door again and checked everything, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't leave me. I decided to sleep on the couch with Jack by my side, just in case. The next morning, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A set of muddy footprints started at the back door and led to the stairs going up to my bedroom. I didn't know what to do. I called the police, but they were vague. They asked if I had seen anyone, and when I said no, they just suggested installing security cameras. I was so shaken that I bought the cameras that same day and became obsessed with checking the recordings. 3 days later, everything escalated. Late at night, I was reviewing the day's footage on my computer monitor. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but then a figure appeared in the backyard. I couldn't make out the face, but the person was wearing a red dress. My heart stopped. It was identical to the one from Emily's profile picture. I didn't know what to do. Then, as if the person knew they were being watched, they turned and stared directly into the camera. The figure on the camera didn't just look. It stood there, motionless, as if daring me to do something. Even though the face was partially hidden in shadow, I knew it was her, or someone who wanted me to believe it was. The posture, the way the head tilted, the red dress. It all matched the picture. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, feeling a terror I'd never experienced before. Then, without warning, the camera feed shook violently, as if someone had grabbed it, and the image cut out. I grabbed a baseball bat I kept in my closet and ran to the back door. Jack was growling low, his fur standing on end. When I opened the door, the yard was empty. I swept the area with a flashlight, checked the gate, and everything seemed fine. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were footprints leading from the yard to the living room window. Small footprints, as if someone had been barefoot. Once again, it felt like this person had entered, or tried to enter, my house. That night, I barely slept. The feeling that I wasn't alone was unbearable. The next day, I decided to take all the camera footage to the police. When the morning came, I rushed to my computer, eager to organize the evidence. But when I opened the folder where the videos were saved, it was empty. Every recording from the past 3 days was gone. It was like someone had accessed the system and erased everything. Then I heard it. Footsteps, coming from upstairs. My blood turned cold. I grabbed the bat again and called for Jack, but he wasn't in the living room. I crept up the stairs, my heart pounding in my ears. The door to my bedroom was slightly ajar, which was unusual because I never left it that way. Pushing the door open with the bat, I found Jack in the corner, cowering and growling softly. And in the middle of the room, standing by the open window, was her. The red dress, the empty eyes. She didn't say a word. She just stood there staring at me. I froze. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but it was like my feet were glued to the floor. Jack growled, but he didn't move, as if he was just as terrified as I was. She took a step toward me, and that's when I managed to react. I shouted for her to leave, trying to sound threatening, but my voice shook with fear. She just tilted her head, studying me, and then, without warning, she turned and jumped out of the window. I rushed to the window and looked down, but she was already gone. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The street was empty, and there were no footprints on the wet ground, even though it had rained earlier that evening. I slammed the window shut, locked every door in the house, and sat on the floor, trying to process what had just happened. Jack came over, still trembling, but calmer now. The sense of relief was fleeting. I knew this wasn't over. The next day, I decided I couldn't stay in that house anymore. I went straight to the police and explained everything, even the parts that sounded insane, like the red dress and the photo from the dating app. They took some notes but made it clear they thought I was overreacting or imagining things. Without evidence, recordings, or witnesses, all they could do was suggest I talk to a therapist. But I knew what I had seen. I knew this wasn't in my head. Since that day, I've never seen her, or whatever she was, again. I installed a new security system, sold the house, and moved to a different neighborhood, hoping to leave it all behind. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I feel like I'm being watched. And every now and then, I catch a glimpse of red in the corner of my eye, like a dress fluttering in the shadows. I don't know who she was or what she wanted, but one thing is certain. She wasn't just a random match on a dating app. And to this day, I can't bring myself to use one ever again.